You're Tamika, right?
Bob!
Hold on, just relax.
Bob!
Oklahoma County prosecutors charge Metro parents for not protecting their intellectually disabled daughter from sexual abuse.
3 people were arrested. Not because someone was murdered, a bank had been robbed. They were arrested because of who lived inside their own house. Body camera footage from the Village, Oklahoma, shows a mother, a father, and their 19-year-old son calmly walking out of their home in handcuffs. At first glance, it looks routine. It wasn't. Investigators would uncover a secret that had been hidden behind that front door for years. A secret involving an 18-year-old daughter, a newborn baby, and a DNA test that completely changed the direction of the investigation. The only question left: who in that house was truly responsible? And the answer was not what anyone expected. But here's where this case takes a turn almost nobody sees coming. The man everyone believed was responsible wasn't. The DNA pointed to someone else. Then, detectives discovered internet searches that made the entire family look even more suspicious. Who searched those questions? Why were they trying to beat a DNA test before the results even came back? And how did 3 adults living under one roof all end up wearing handcuffs? By the end of this case, 1 family would be destroyed, 3 people would face felony charges, and a vulnerable young woman would finally reveal what had really been happening inside the place that was supposed to keep her safe. The truth is even more disturbing than you think. Before we go any further into what happened inside that house, drop a comment right now and tell me where you are watching from. I want to know how far this story is traveling. And if you are new here, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Stories like this one deserve to be heard. It was July 1st, 2024, when everything began to unravel. Not inside the Molden home, but inside a hospital in Oklahoma County. A young woman had just given birth. She was 18 years old. She had a significant intellectual disability. And when hospital staff tried to find out who the father of the baby was, they could not get a straight answer from anyone. The Oklahoma Department of Human Services was notified almost immediately. DHS workers sat down with the young woman and with her family. They asked the same question every way they could, and they kept getting the same answer. A boyfriend. No name attached to it. No phone number. No one in the family had ever met him, seen him, or could describe him in any detail whatsoever. The nurses were not convinced. The DHS workers were not convinced either. Think about what they were being asked to believe. That a young woman with a severe intellectual disability had a secret boyfriend that her entire household somehow knew nothing about. It did not add up. That is when Lieutenant Brett South of the Village Police Department was brought in. Lieutenant South did not push her. He did not pressure her or fire questions at her. He sat with her and spoke to her calmly. He told her she was not in trouble. He told her that being honest would not mean losing her baby. He made her feel safe enough to tell the truth. And when she finally felt safe, the story changed completely. She told him she believed her father was the one who had gotten her pregnant. That single statement pointed the entire investigation directly at 66-year-old Nathaniel Molden Sr. Now, it is important to understand something here. People in situations like this one, especially those with cognitive disabilities, do not always disclose the full truth immediately. It is not because they are being dishonest. It is because fear, confusion, and family pressure can make it extremely difficult to say what actually happened. Lieutenant South's patient, careful approach was the reason this young woman finally opened up. Without that moment, this case may never have moved forward the way it did. But what came next shifted the entire investigation in a direction nobody saw coming. With the young woman's statement now on record, investigators had a direction. All attention turned to 66-year-old Nathaniel Molden Sr. He was the head of the household. He was one of the only adults in that home, and according to his own daughter, he was the one responsible. But then came something that stopped investigators cold. When detectives examined a phone linked to Nathaniel Sr., they found 2 internet searches that nobody could explain away. The first search was, how to corrupt a DNA test. The second, do siblings share the same DNA? Read that again slowly. A man whose daughter had just given birth under suspicious circumstances had been sitting somewhere in that house, typing those exact words into a search engine. This was not casual curiosity. These were not random searches. In the middle of an active investigation into his own daughter's pregnancy, Nathaniel Sr. had been looking for ways to interfere with DNA results and asking whether brothers and sisters carry matching genetic material. Those two searches together told investigators one thing very clearly. This was a man who already knew more than he was saying, and he was afraid of what the truth would cost him. What made it worse was what Tamika Molden eventually revealed. She told investigators that approximately 9 months before the birth, which would place it right around the time the baby was conceived, she had seen her husband coming out of their daughter's bedroom under circumstances that did not sit right with her. She said she suspected something had happened. She drew her own conclusion about what it meant, and then she did nothing. She did not call the police. She did not contact DHS. She did not move her daughter out of that room, out of that situation, or out of that house. Instead, Tamika Molden said she chose to wait for the baby to be born so a DNA test could confirm or rule out what she already suspected. By every measure, the evidence pointed directly at Nathaniel Molden Sr. Investigators were building their case around him. But DNA does not care about assumptions. And the results were about to change everything. Investigators collected DNA samples from every male member of the Molden household and submitted them to the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, the OSB, for testing. Now all they could do was wait for the science to speak. When the results came back, everything changed. The DNA did not match Nathaniel Molden Sr. It matched his son, 19-year-old Nathaniel Molden Jr. The match came back at 99%. Deputy Chief Matt Butcher of the Village Police Department confirmed it publicly. His words were direct and left no room for doubt. He said, and these are his exact words, "We collected DNA from the male members of the household, and it was confirmed through DNA testing at the OSB to match the brother. The brother. Let that settle for a moment. The young woman who had just given birth was 18 years old. She had a significant intellectual disability. She lived in a home with both of her parents present, and the father of her child was her own brother, a young man who slept under the same roof, sat at the same table, and was protected by the same two adults who were supposed to be protecting her. A 99% DNA match is not an error. It is not a coincidence. It is biological fact. There was no question about what it meant. When investigators sat down with Nathaniel Jr., he did not deny the contact entirely, but he tried to put distance between himself and the pregnancy. He told police that the sexual contact with his sister had happened approximately 2 years before the birth, at a time when both of them were still minors. Investigators did not accept that framing, and the reason is simple. A 99% DNA match confirming him as the father of a baby born in July of 2024 does not come from something that stopped 2 years before conception. The truth was already written in the science, and it was only getting more difficult to look away from. When detectives sat down with Nathaniel Molden Jr., he admitted it. He confirmed that sexual contact with his sister had taken place. There was no full denial. The DNA had already made denial impossible. But what he said next was the detail that shifted the entire weight of this case. He told investigators that his parents had caught them before, not once, not a passing suspicion. His own parents had walked in on their children together and seen exactly what was happening inside that house. They knew. And what did they do with that knowledge? They spanked both children. Then they moved on. No conversation beyond that moment. No follow-up. No outside help sought from anyone. Think carefully about what that means. Nathaniel Molden Sr. and Tamika Molden had direct, first-hand knowledge that something deeply wrong was happening between their son and their daughter. A daughter with a significant intellectual disability who could not fully process what was being done to her, could not stand up for herself, and could not find her own way out of that situation. And their answer was a spanking and silence. There was no call to the Department of Human Services. There was no removal of either child from the situation. There was no conversation with a doctor, a counselor, or anyone outside those four walls. Nothing changed inside that house. The door simply closed again, and life went on as though nothing had happened. Deputy Chief Matt Butcher of the Village Police Department addressed this directly. His words were clear. He said, "Part of the reason charges were filed on the parents was because there was no intervention to prevent actions toward this child at the time who couldn't fend for herself." She could not fend for herself. That phrase carries the full weight of this case. Now look at both parents and what each of them chose. Tamika suspected her husband for months after seeing him leave their daughter's bedroom under suspicious circumstances. She waited for a DNA test instead of acting. Nathaniel Sr. had searched how to corrupt a DNA test on his phone while an investigation was already underway. Neither one of them, at any point, made a decision that placed their daughter's safety first. Not once. This young woman had no one in that house standing in her corner. Not her mother, not her father, not her brother. Every adult under that roof failed her, in different ways, at different moments. But the result for her was exactly the same. She was alone in a house full of people. On October 8, 2024, officers from the Village Police Department pulled up to the Molden home. They were not there to ask questions. They were not there to have another conversation. They arrived with 3 confirmed felony warrants, one for each adult living in that house. The body camera footage captured everything. An officer approached the door and called out for Tamika by name. There was confusion at first, the kind of confusion that comes from people who did not expect this moment to actually arrive. One by one, they were brought out. Tamika was cuffed. She protested immediately. Her words were, "I never neglected my child." Nathaniel Sr. was next, asking about bond amounts before he even fully understood what the charges against him were. Then came Nathaniel Jr., told plainly by an officer that he had a felony warrant related to incest with an adult. All 3 of them were placed into the back of a patrol car. And this is the part that is very difficult to sit with. Once those doors closed and the camera kept rolling, the conversation inside that vehicle was not what most people would expect. Nobody in that car sounded like a family whose worst secret had just been pulled into the open. There were no tears. There was no silence heavy with guilt. Instead, they talked about bond amounts. They talked about caseworkers. Tamika mentioned that she had just finished cooking beans before the officers knocked. Someone was worried about clothes left behind in the house. Someone else was concerned about medications. The beans on the stove. The clothes in the bedroom. The front door being locked. These were the concerns of 3 people sitting in the back of a police car on felony warrants. Warrants tied directly to what had been done to a vulnerable young woman inside their home for over 2 years. Bond amounts were confirmed at the scene. Nathaniel Jr.'s bond was set at $25,000. Nathaniel Sr. and Tamika each had bonds set at $5,000. The victim and her newborn baby were placed into the custody of the Department of Human Services. I want to pause here for a moment, because I genuinely want to know what is going through your mind right now. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you have not already liked this video, please do that now. It helps this story reach more people who need to hear it. Subscribe if you are new here. Now let us talk about what happened when this case reached the courts. The case moved through the courts over the months that followed, and when the legal outcomes finally came, they told 3 very different stories. In December of 2024, Nathaniel Molden Jr. stood before the court and pleaded guilty to incest. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison. In March of 2026, Tamika Molden entered a plea of no contest to child neglect. She received a sentence of 7 years, but deferred. That means the sentence was not activated, no prison time. Instead, she was placed on probation under the supervision of the Department of Corrections. As long as she does not violate the terms of that probation, she will never spend a single day behind bars for what happened to her daughter. In May of 2026, Nathaniel Molden Sr. pleaded guilty to child neglect. He received 5 years in prison. Now look at those outcomes side by side. Tamika and Nathaniel Sr. were charged with the same crime, child neglect. But the court handed them completely different sentences. One is serving 5 years in prison. The other is living outside a cell, on probation, with the possibility of never being incarcerated at all. That contrast is not easy to ignore, especially when you go back to what the source material tells us. Tamika knew. She had seen her husband leaving her daughter's bedroom under suspicious circumstances 9 months before the birth. She chose to wait. That was a choice she made while her daughter remained in that house, in that situation, with no protection. Whether a deferred sentence reflects the full weight of that choice is not for this channel to decide. That is a question worth sitting with. What the court record does confirm, without any dispute, is that all 3 of them were found legally responsible for what happened inside that house. Before we get to the close, I want to talk directly to you for a moment. Not as a narrator, just person to person. Because this case is not just a story about one family in Oklahoma. It carries lessons that are worth taking seriously. The first one is this: silence is never neutral. When Tamika Molden saw her husband leaving her daughter's bedroom under suspicious circumstances, she made a choice. She chose to wait. She chose to keep it inside the house. And while she was waiting, her daughter remained in that home, in that situation, with nothing and no one standing between her and further harm. Staying quiet to protect a family from shame does not keep the family safe. It keeps the victim exposed. The second lesson is just as direct. Punishment without protection solves nothing. When both parents caught their son and daughter together and responded with a spanking, they treated a serious crime like a discipline problem. That response did not stop what was happening. It did not address why it was happening. The only thing it communicated to Nathaniel Jr. was that there were consequences for being caught, not that what he was doing was deeply wrong and criminal. The moment they walked away and said nothing more, the door was left open for it to continue. The third lesson is one that applies to anyone caring for a person with a disability. Vulnerability requires more protection, not less. This young woman's intellectual disability meant she could not fully understand what was being done to her. She could not advocate for herself. She could not find her own way out. That reality placed a greater responsibility on the adults in her life, not a smaller one. Her parents had more reason to be vigilant, not less, and they failed that responsibility completely. The fourth lesson is perhaps the most important one. Reporting is protection, not betrayal. This situation had been going on inside that house for a significant period of time before a hospital birth finally forced it into the open. The system eventually responded. DHS stepped in. Lieutenant Brett South asked the right questions. The OSB confirmed the truth. But all of that came far too late for a young woman who had already carried this alone for years. One earlier report, from a neighbor, a relative, a teacher, anyone, could have reached her sooner. Protecting a family name and protecting a family member are not the same thing. This case proves that beyond any reasonable doubt. Through every section of this story, one person has remained at the center of it all. A young woman with an intellectual disability who lived inside a home that should have been the safest place in her world. It was not. For years, the people who were supposed to protect her either participated in her harm or watched it happen and said nothing. She and her newborn child are now in the care of the Department of Human Services. Whatever comes next for them, it begins outside those walls. And that, at the very least, is a start. Here is the one thing I want you to leave with today. Real protection does not begin after the damage is done. It does not start at a hospital bed or inside a courtroom. It starts the moment something feels wrong, even when that something is happening inside your own family. Especially then. Because the people who needed to act in this case had every opportunity to do so. They just chose not to. And a young woman paid the price for every single one of those choices. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment below and tell me what hit you the hardest. I read every single one. Subscribe if you are new here, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and give this video a like before you go. I will see you in the next one.